Hello, sexy. How you doing, baby?
Hey partner, how you doing? I almost died just now. I got, dear listener, I got a little wet. I was out in the brand new Second Thought studio shed, which I've been building. Not me because I'm incompetent, but that has been built in the backyard. Because I've currently been like right now. This may be the last you see actually of this little.
Oh, the
guest
bedroom?
room.
Oh,
Yeah.
I just got used to the bedroom, guy.
I know. Yeah, so I'm finally kicked out of here, headed over to the shed. But anyway, I was out there plugging in stuff and moving furniture around. And of course, as soon as I get out there, the sky opens up and ear-splitting bang of thunder directly above. And then it was a downpour for the next however long I was in there. And eventually I messaged you, Gottmik. I'm like, I'm going to have to just dart across here. I'm going to be a couple minutes late. I need to find something to wrap my computer in so it doesn't get fried on the way back to like 30 feet to the house.
You're trying to tell me that the first time you wanted to record the program in your new shed office studio, God was immediately like, nah, I'm good, bro.
Yeah, get back in that shitty beige room. No, it's gonna be cool. So this it's been in the works for a while now, this shed. It is basically a fully detached building, got electric, got internet, it's
That's
insulated,
sick. I'm
air
jelly.
conditioning. I just did some LED strips around the baseboards. I made sure there was trim that comes like an inch off the wall so I can tuck LED strips inside there so it casts a nice warm glow up from the floorboards.
But don't do bisexual lighting with that shit. It's so
No.
2014.
Just warm.
Yeah.
We're talking 2,700 Kelvin to 3,000 Kelvin. There we go. Yeah.
Oh, I
nice,
pretend I
warm.
know what all of this means because I'm a true man's man that knows all the electricity things.
Nice little evening relaxing candle light kind of temperature stuff. Not the sterile stuff, not the blue and purple and whatever that your boy used to do back in the day. It's going to be nice. It's going to be classy. Just wait till you see it.
Oh, everything you do is classy, baby.
Oh, sure.
And I'm unironically jealous. Aren't you afraid of a potential robbery because it's a completely detached studio that is filled with absurdly expensive tech?
Stuff? Yes, there are no windows. I will say that. That was a design choice. I want to control the light completely. So the only way in or out is a door which I can lock, and that's about the best I can do. Our bedroom is like it abuts the backyard, and so I could hear if someone was trying to bust into the shed, I guess. But we have had a number of car break-ins this summer.
Whoa.
So I think some neighborhood kids with just too much time on their hands. But yeah, that's like 6 people on our street got their cars busted into the like a couple weeks ago. Kind of weird.
Did the cars actually? They start up the cars? Did they leave with the cars, or they just found?
No, they just
stuff.
They just took stuff out of the cars.
Isn't that half of the reason one lives in American suburbia because that shit don't happen?
In theory, yeah, but then you get these shithead kids who are like bored and can't go anywhere, and so what do? Petty crime.
the great class divide.
Yeah.
That does not apply to children. Does not matter if you're living in a super ghettoized fucking area, struggling to get your next meal, versus living in a very well equipped, very high end place. When that puberty hits, when that jolt of pubic hair starts developing, you just want to do mischievous deeds. I wasn't like that. I was nerdy
Really?
as shit. I was the most in my own thoughts type kid. I was very antisocial. I was pretty introverted. I thought all the other kids were freaky and weird and strange, and liked scary stuff like kickball and have conversation. Terrifying. So that's why my parents unironically would punish me by taking like the AC cord of the PC so I can't play video games, and then my detention would be to send me outside to play. So my detention wasn't get back in the house. My detention was get the fuck out. But eventually that obviously completely switched on its head. I don't even know why, which turned me into a very sociable individual, even though sometimes I still have the leftover of just wanting to be by myself for a while, at least one day a week. I just a couch potato. But it might have something to do with the invention of ethanol or something, but that rewired me. That was the key necessary to make the perfect little girls. But Professor Utonium added an extra ingredient to concoction, ethanol, and they didn't save the world. They just went to parties. That's
our boy. I was like a non-person until I was probably until I went to college. I didn't even like music. Like I did not have any music taste. I didn't have any opinions about anything. I just like did what I was told, did my schoolwork, and that was that. I was a very strange, again, like you, introverted little fella.
Non-person is a really good term to use for it. Yeah. I don't think I don't think I was a fully developed human being. I don't think I was a half-developed human being. Completely half-baked, not even in the oven, thrown out of the oven, okay, with the bath water.
No.
And then in college, like stuff started clicking. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's probably how it is for a lot of people, I imagine. Yeah. Sound off in the comments if you were a real person before college, people.
A lot of people like miss their high school days or something. And I'm like, I'm not sure I even remember them. Like, no, I do. I remember some of the people. I still have good friends from then. But it was like, really, high school?
Yeah.
That shit sucked. Like, it was mid as fuck. Like, it was absurdly mid. That's your...
Like, in the States, it's really bad because you can't drive anywhere. Like, you are truly trapped when you're in high school until you're about junior or senior is when you get your license. And if you're lucky, you get your hands on a car of some sort, whether you take your parents or you buy your own. Like me, I bought a really shitty 1981 Datsun 280ZX from a guy who was moving out of the state and sold it to me for $2,300. And that thing, it ran. It was a car.
It's legendary. Yeah. Datsun Z?
Yeah, the 280ZX, 1981. I love the Datsuns. Nerd Car Talk. 240 and 280 are beautiful, beautiful cars. The ZX, less so. It was the 2+2, which means you had the half seats in the back, where if you tilt the one seat down, you can kind of cram a child in the back seat, and it just made the body lines not nearly as pretty.
Dude, fuck you. This is a sick-ass car, man.
It rocked. I mean, it was loud. It was fast. It just wasn't super reliable.
Oh, yeah. It's a classic.
It's cool.
Just like with humans, cars operate on the same basis. Either it's reliable and boring as fuck, either he's reliable and boring as fuck, or they're the most fun motherfucker you've ever met, but then doesn't pick up the phone for like 12 days while you're trying to figure out what to do with the corpse in your suitcase.
Well, howdy, y'all. Welcome back to the deprogram. You'll be glad to hear that the rain has cleared up. It's still cloudy, but we got some light coming through the window, illuminating my gorgeous cheekbones. You say he's got them too, but you can't see him because he's got one of his old-fashioned masks on.
Brother.
Why don't you have one of your whole mouth hole masks today?
Because it's too hot for the whole mask, both because I'm too sexy, because I introduce another part of my face to chat, and then I look myself in the camera as I'm speaking, and I get turned on by myself, and it gets all sweaty, and it gets very fucking nasty and shit. So no, like I was using it previously, and it was just too hot. It's too hot even with the AC now.
Rip.
I have no idea what we're gonna do when our audience tells us that it is exceptionally problematic to use air conditioning because of global warming. I think that's when I'm going to leave the left, because I ain't living in no fucking place with no goddamn AC.
I need my AC.
Holy fucking shit, yeah.
Speaking of AC, it's going to become more and more relevant because of today's topic, and that is climate change. Today,
buy AC stocks. The world might end, but you will be stock rich. Wow-wee-wah.
Really, we should, dear listeners, if you are an engineer, if you are in the refrigeration or air conditioning industry, hit us up and we will make an empire selling air conditioning units to all of the world, because that is going to become more and more relevant. What was the statistic you found the other? I think it was you. Something like a 6,000% increase in demand for AC units over the next whatever years. Maybe it wasn't you.
Yeah. I looked at. What do you call it? Yeah, I watched somebody go over the most recent McKinsey and another consulting company's analysis of climate change, and they were making both an argument on what it would do for private businesses if climate change was to be stopped, but then they moved and started talking about the business opportunities of a changing climate. And there they start talking about how much money, for example, you will be able to make off of air conditioning platforms, and more importantly, of how important it is for investors to start readjusting their portfolio, not only based on the now outdated model of only investing in environmentally friendly corporations, but also diversifying and investing in the other potential future of humankind, which is a species living on a planet that is no longer very welcoming to them. So yes, it's we reached the full cycle. We made the meme of hey, the market might solve climate change because they're also going to be left without the planet. Then some motherfuckers were like, but they can fly out, or they can build bunkers in New Zealand or some shit. Well, now the billionaires don't even do that LARP. They're like, nah, man, we're going to make some goddamn money.
You guys are on your own.
That shit looking good, looking busted. So yeah.
We lived in the best timeline, truly. Well, today we are going to talk about climate change. You guessed it. And we're going to basically just give you the most up-to-date stats we have from the most recent IPCC report. We'll give a little bit of detail on what the IPCC is if you're not familiar with it. I feel like there hasn't been as much talk about climate recently, both on the right and the left, which is kind of surprising. It's not something we can really afford to stick our heads in the sand over. So we need to keep that at the forefront of all of our discussions about future-proofing, about moving forward, about democratizing everything from the economy to our workplaces to our urban design. It is something that needs to be included in every calculation. So we figured, why not give a little update on climate? And update, not good. So let us begin.
Before you begin, the main motivation behind us doing this is because we understand that all of you are super busy and we are not. We make a podcast. So then we spend countless hours looking at the graphs and numbers we absolutely do not fucking understand.
Yep.
While we were fucking slamming our head into these 3 million page reports until we finally started understanding it. And we were like, okay, if this is all we do, and it takes this long to understand it, let's make sure we properly process it, chew it up, and as good mama birds spit it into your mouth. So please open your mouths and prepare to learn about climate change reports, the current perspective on the future, and many other things, especially from the mamaist of all mama birds, JT Chapman.
That's me, baby. Come here and let me tickle them ears. All right, let us give a little bit of background on...
Was that sexual tickling ear? Oh, no, that's like
certainly not. Certainly not.
Okay, I got afraid.
They are little piggies. Have you ever touched a pig's ear? So soft. So soft.
Only like corpses of them?
Oh... All right, I'm going to bleep that so Hakeem doesn't have to hear it. Okay.
What?
In the beginning, man discovered fire.
In the beginning. Okay, sorry, please.
In the beginning, man discovered fire. In the shortly thereafter, man discovered capitalism. And then things went downhill rather quickly. So, as you all know, climate change is indeed exacerbated at an extreme rate by human activity.
Jews,
that's why
human activity.
We're getting started early with the conspiracy, and because of this, back in the 80s, we decided, hey, we should probably figure out what's going on here, and so we created a thing to study that phenomenon of climate change. Before the 80s, there was a lot of stuff done by private companies. Primarily, Exxon, funnily enough, I have a video on this. Exxon was at the forefront of climate research for a long time. Unfortunately, the data that they gathered, they stamped with "for internal eyes only" and buried it, and then launched the most expensive propaganda campaign in human history to cover up their findings and make sure that no one acted on them. Actually, they were kind of stoked about climate change back then because they're like, oh, some of this ice is going to melt. We can get further north. We can put more drilling up there. That's sick. That is what you can get from the oil industry. But let me talk a little bit about this actual group that does care about the effects of climate change, and that is the IPCC. So what is this group? The acronym stands for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and it is the world's leading authority on climate science. To put it in liberal terms, it's like the Climate Avengers, except instead of superheroes that fight at airports for some reason, it's thousands of scientists who typically don't fight at airports. These scientists come from around the world.
That's some really base climate change activists, if you know what I mean.
Oh,
Woo!
God.
No,
have you seen First Reformed? Great movie. Go watch First Reformed. I don't condone that. But anyway, these scientists come from around the world and from nearly every country on Earth, 195 countries to be exact. Now, one important point about the IPCC is they don't do their own research, at least in their capacity as IPCC scientists. Their job is to collect, review, and synthesize every shred of legitimate climate research from every publication and every peer-reviewed document they can get their hands on. So when misguided people say that the IPCC has an agenda or whatever, you can just gently remind them that they're not pushing their own data. They are simply providing a more accessible version of the most up-to-date information the world has gathered on climate change. And when I say accessible, I mean that's being a little bit generous here. These are still working scientists we're talking about. They're nerds. They like long documents. Their periodical assessment reports are enormous. They are some of the biggest documents you will find on any subject. The latest one, which I will get to in a minute, contains over 10,000 pages of analysis broken down into working groups, each focused on a specific aspect of the crisis. Thankfully, they do provide what they call a summary for policymakers, which policymakers do not read. But anyone who does read these documents, this is the thing they're actually going to read. It's like novella length, more like 30 to 40 pages per working group, and there are 3 working groups, so 90 to 120 pages. Still a long document, but much more accessible than 10,000 pages. So these working groups are physical science basis, impacts and adaptation, and mitigation. Basically, it's cold hard numbers, what those numbers mean, and like in terms of fallout and stuff, and what we can do about it. But back to the IPCC itself, the group was formed by the UN in 1988, and since then has been the source for accurate, current, and actionable data. When you hear leaders talk about limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius or net zero by 2050, they're generally referring to the IPCC's science. They give us the bottom line for climate change, but they leave it up to the rest of us to decide what we're going to do about it. Even if in some of their more recent documents, they're starting to hint at, what is to be done, but we will touch on that a little bit later. So I want to start by giving the most concise summary I can of the 6th Assessment Report, or AR6, which was finalized in 2023. 10,000-page story short, the working groups provided 5 key points that are critical to understand the climate situation. Number 1, climate change is unequivocally caused by human activity. Human-induced greenhouse gas emissions are unequivocally responsible. That there is no debate whatsoever among the scientific community that we are responsible for the warming observed since the pre-industrial era. Global surface temperature has already increased by roughly 1.1 degrees Celsius compared to 1850 to 1900, and warming is occurring faster and with more intensity than previously projected. This is a trend that we see with each subsequent report. They're like, it's happening at this rate, and then the next report comes out, we'd like to amend our previous statement. It's actually happening faster, and that happens with each document. So it's not a great trend, but at least they are keeping up with it and giving the most up-to-date estimates they can, and remaining conservative with their estimates, which I think is important, so people aren't like saying, oh, you're crying that the sky is falling or whatever. No, they're actually pretty conservative with their projections. But point number 2, climate impacts are widespread and intensifying. Every single region of the world is experiencing climate impacts. You got heat waves, droughts, floods, sea level rise, and especially biodiversity loss is one that's not talked about all that much, but is very important. Climate-related damages are more severe for vulnerable communities, especially in the global south, where you don't have the infrastructure in place to mitigate some of the worst effects. And some changes, such as glacier melt and sea level rise, are irreversible for centuries or millennia. Not great. Number 3, adaptation is critical, but it is insufficient on its own. Effective adaptation measures exist, and they can reduce climate risks, but a lot of them are underfunded, or they're poorly implemented, or they're not keeping pace with the impacts, or all of the above, in the case of like the United States, for example. And there are limits to adaptation, particularly for ecosystems and low-lying coastal areas, where it's just like you're getting constantly pounded by sea level rise and these tropical storms and stuff like that, where it's just you don't have a chance to breathe, it seems, between these crises. Number 4, immediate deep emissions cuts are needed. So to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, global emissions must peak before this year. Then they must be halved by 2030 and must reach net zero by 2050. So, do we think emissions are going to peak this year? I don't think so. We'll see. Delays to this schedule will require more drastic cuts later and increase climate risks. Now, current policies put us on track for 2.5 to 3.2 degrees Celsius of warming by 2100, which is far, far above the Paris Agreement targets. But that is what is to be expected when people are like, why don't we just keep extracting until we are literally forced to stop extracting? Might as well make the money, right? Which is a terrible
Think
mindset
of
to have.
the AC company stuff.
Exactly. That's literally it, yeah. But for a brief period of time, we made a lot of value for shareholders. Number 5, systemic transformation is necessary. And this is where they get to the what is to be done, wink, wink bit. Even climate scientists are starting to say, like, perhaps systemic change could be maybe a way to curb some of these problems by, excesses. And so they're really, really hedging their language, but they're basically saying, hey, capitalism's doing this, guys. But major transitions are needed across energy, transportation, industry, agriculture, and land use. Solutions like renewable energy, reforestation, energy efficiency, and dietary shifts. They do the liberal thing there of saying, hey, if everybody just, eats less meat, which is true. It is true. If we produced, or if we didn't do the factory farming thing, that would make an impact. Methane is a big contributor to climate change. However, they need to address the military-industrial complex. That is far more of a contributor than a bunch of cows. Though, you know what? If you want to go vegan, that is awesome. It is both morally correct, and it will, if everybody does it, which everyone will not do it, it will put a big dent in the problem here. But these shifts, all of the renewable energy and stuff, it's feasible and increasingly cost effective, but it still requires political will to get there. It's not like you just like sign a paper and it happens. There's a lot of stuff that needs to move there. And then equity and climate justice must be central, right? You can't do this without making sure that the suffering isn't just shunted onto the people who are least equipped to handle the fallout, right? So developing countries need financial support, they need technology assistance, and fair access to these resources that will probably come from the global north, which is the least at risk of climate change and the most at fault for climate change. So there needs to be a serious discussion there about equity and climate justice. So those are the big picture items. But since I know at least some of our listeners are dirty little nerds and you want hard numbers, let me give you some bullet points from Working Group 1's dataset. So we'll start with warming trends. Global surface temperature has increased by 1.1 degrees Celsius, or thereabouts, plus or minus 0.1 degrees Celsius since 1850 to 1900. And the past 4 decades have each been successively warmer than any decade since 1850. Since 1850. And like not that as a batch, they're all a bit warmer than 1850. Each one has been warmer and warmer than any previous decade, which is a worrying trend, to say the least. Under the human responsibility...
I think that.
I don't see it. I think they're wrong. But the human responsibility thing, this might be my favorite data point from the entire document. I read all 10,000 pages. This one sounds ridiculous at first. Here you go. Human activity has caused over 100% of the observed warming since pre-industrial times. Over 100%. How does that work? Think about it for a sec. Mm-hmm. Because without us, natural forces would have slightly cooled the planet. So that's, big oof.
So we make up for the shit shoveling. Holy shit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a big oof. But it's also very funny to say. So, silver lining. Sea level rise.
It's hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah. What can you do but laugh through it, right? I mean,
a whole species collectively committing suicide in the worst case scenario, or like heavy body damage to themselves collectively, while being managed to a random piece of code called the market. It's fucking
remarkable.
It's hilarious.
It is objectively very funny. It's just like
a suicidal species.
Yeah,
the suicidal drive of the species. They should develop some like additional like alternative theory to that of remind me the name of the guy, evolutionary theory of
Darwin.
Yeah, like additional Darwinism when applied to the Homo sapien, because he was the first species on the planet which achieved sentience, which allowed it to de-evolve itself and eventually commit ritual civilizational suicide, right? So like all species fight on a particular territory in order to develop particular traits that are better than other traits in order for them to develop, and then the better traits go on, the not so good traits don't. When it comes to
Mm-hmm.
non-consciousness, having creatures battling it out. Battling it out is the wrong term, but the audience gets my point. But with humans, we reach a particular point, and then we're not trying to develop a new skill set, a new mutation, a new approach to environmental problems. No, we do the opposite. We look at the problems in our particular environment, in this case, very literally, the literal environment, and we're like, I like lay down here and like die. It's the opposite of Darwinian. It is debunking Darwin when it comes to its application.
Hey, you just won over the right wing. Darwin debunked by climate change. There you go. We've got
the
right wingers.
You'd be surprised. There's a lot of social Darwinists and racial Darwinists and so on. It's a whole thing.
We really are the dumbest, smartest species. It's remarkable. I love us. We're good at that.
Equal balance between potential and the lack thereof. That is why I love the human experiment, but that is why it's so pathetic sometimes.
Yeah. One thing before I move on, I realized I never used the important word when I was talking about the veganism thing. I don't mean to shit on vegans at all. Like, you're doing a good thing. What I meant to say there is that a lot of times the authors of these documents do take a more individual approach, or at least they have in the past, versus a more systemic approach. Thankfully, they're starting to use more systemic language, but when they're talking about, dietary changes and stuff, it does tend to take a more individual flavor. That's all I meant by that. Please don't pillory me. Anyway, moving on. Sea level rise. Global mean sea level rose by 20 centimeters between 1901 and 2018. And the current rate of sea level rise is about 3.7 millimeters per year between 2006 and 2018, more than double the rate from 1901 to 1971. Glaciers and ice sheets. The Greenland ice sheet is losing about 279 billion tons of ice per year, and the Antarctic ice sheet is losing about 148 billion tons per year. Nearly all glaciers worldwide are shrinking, a trend now considered virtually certain. I love the IPCC for this. They're very conservative with their language. They usually give like a lower confidence level than the average person would. For the glaciers in particular, they want it to be extra certain. So they've got this guy named Gary who's been standing out on a glacier since 2006. He's a real hardworking guy, great attention to detail. Anyway, he just finally yelled back, "Yeah, it's melting." So they added that phrase, virtually certain, to their data about melting ice. So thank you, Gary. We now know for sure that they are melting. But yeah, glaciers, the melting ice thing is one thing that people tend to latch onto with climate change, and it is very important. But it's just one of a huge number of effects that climate change has. Let's talk carbon budgets real quick. To have a 50% chance of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, we can emit no more than 500 gigatons of CO2 from 2020 onward. So not per year, total. At current rates, about 40-ish gigatons per year, this budget will be used up by 2030. Yeah. So, not great. We are speed running that budget. But we'll, hopefully we can get those numbers down a little bit. Projected warming. Under current policies, the world is on track for 2.4 to 3.2 degrees of warming by 2100, which, we'll all be around then, right? Think positive. Limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius with no or limited overshoot requires CO2 emissions to fall by 45% by 2030 and net zero by 2050. Will these things happen? Almost certainly not. If any country on Earth can meet their individual net zero goals, it's China. They're doing a really good job if you look into their projects like afforestation and green cities and stuff like that. But the rest of the world, for the most part, lacks the political will to do anything meaningful enough to make that historic shift to net zero. So that is the tiniest amount of bullet points from the most recent report, which was finalized in 2023. They just published their, the IPCC published their methodology report for the upcoming one, which will come out in 2027, I believe, or at least will be finalized then. So hopefully we'll be seeing more up-to-date climate data within the next year or so, which is, get hyped for that. Another 10,000 pages for us to read through, and then we will dutifully bring you that report when it hits the streets. Yugobnik, I'll hand it over to you to talk about the accuracy of these reports, because that is another thing that climate change doubters, hoaxers, whatever, tend to fixate on. It's like, oh, how can they know this for sure, right?
Absolutely, and it's been manipulated throughout the years, and that's why, for example, like JT mentioned, you have basically the summary, and you have many different segments that are summarized, and they're for policymakers or the most important class of people on the planet, the podcasters. Go and check out. But you have like these tens of thousands of climate change deniers paid hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars by every single capitalist industry under the sun, who find the smallest footnotes under a footnote a footnote on the more generalized reports, and then milk it as much as possible and spread as much misinformation as possible. That's why it's important for us to not only read these reports, but kind of understand what kind of pattern they're following, what kind of pattern they've been following since almost their inception, and just how legitimate they are, in order to be able to properly combat certain climate change deniers whenever they attack said reports. So for decades, those very same skeptics, fossil fuel lobbyists, and reasonable centrists have all tried to undermine climate science by claiming its predictions are alarmist or totally unreliable. But here's the thing. The IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which also has CPC in its name, or CCP, which there you go. I immediately, just from the name, yep. I can make 200 advertisements for you, just saying this all over again and over again and over again to dissuade people from listening to it. So it's it's very easy to be a reactionary. I'm sometimes jealous.
You missed your calling. You really should have gone into business for them.
No, I'm doing it for communism, but I sleep well at night.
Yeah.
Sure, I don't have 17 Rolls Royces outside of my house, but I ain't doing too bad either, thanks to our beautiful patrons. So, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has actually been more right than wrong, and where it has missed the mark, it's usually because it was too cautious, not too extreme. So let's break down what the IPCC has predicted over the years, how these forecasts have held up, and why we should still be taking them seriously, especially if we actually care about, a little known thing called our fucking species. So, as you heard from JT, as a reminder, the IPCC releases massive assessment reports roughly every 6 to 7 years. These reports don't do original research. They summarize the state of the science from thousands of studies and scientists around the world, which leads us to the OG, the First Assessment Report, FAR, not to be confused with the very cool-looking rifle, back in 1990. It predicted fairly rapid warming, about 0.3 Celsius per decade, which ended up being too high. Since then, we've seen closer to 0.14 degrees Celsius per decade. But before you assume they were just fear-mongering, and what definitely climate deniers do, and use this report as a very big argument on why everything that was done before should be rejected, it's important to know why they were off. They expected higher emissions than we actually got. CO2 levels didn't rise quite as fast as predicted, in part because of global shifts in energy use, some of which came from climate activism and policy changes. So that's you will see a pattern, and you probably already have, where you have right-wingers saying climate change is not happening. And then certain policies are enacted, which slows down the development of climate-first policies and regulations in particular places, which leads for everything that the scientists have predicted to lower because something is being done. Then they say, oh, there you go, the scientists didn't do it correctly, didn't do the analysis correctly, and then they take back said policies which contributed to the scientists not being wrong, but just for their trajectory changing because something was actually done. So yeah, we are always with one step behind, because if we do everything right, then they use the argument that climate change is not that dangerous or bad because it's not going at the radical pace that it's going on, and vice versa. They make money. So their assumptions about how sensitive the climate is to CO2, called climate sensitivity, in the first report we need to mention, were also less accurate. They use a slightly outdated number for how much warming we get from doubling CO2. In short, their math wasn't terrible. It was just early days and we had less data. But most importantly, to repeat myself, we also saw the first patterns of how the right will approach these topics. By the time of the second report in 1995 and third report in 2001, things got a little better. CO2 projections were more realistic, and the temperature predictions mostly matched what actually happened. The third report, for example, predicted both greenhouse gas trends and global temperatures pretty well up through the mid-2000s. Sea level rise, though, they were, interestingly enough, way too conservative. They didn't include fast ice sheet melt, and so the numbers ended up being underestimates. The pattern, underestimating certain feedback loops, will come back and kind of repeat itself later. We'll explain why. Moving on, we're at the fourth assessment report in 2007, where they forecasted that the planet would warm at a rate of about 0.18 Celsius per decade between 2000 and 2020. When scientists checked the actual numbers years later, the observed warming was a bit lower, roughly 0.1 to 0.15 per decade, depending on how you average it out. Now, that might sound like the IPCC got it wrong, but they really didn't. The difference fell well within the range of uncertainty, and the overall long-term trend matched their predictions very, very well. So what exactly happened? Basically, natural climate wobbles. Remember what I just said earlier? If we do good policy and then the damage lowers, they say nothing is happening. Well, sometimes we don't even have to do good policy, and things change because of natural climate wobbles. Things like volcanic activity, solar cycles, and especially what is known as the La Nina events, which put a bit of temporary lid on surface temperatures in the 2000s, for example. This slowdown in visible surface warming, even though the planet was still heating up overall, got dubbed the hiatus, quote unquote. And right on cue, fossil fuel lobbyists, conservative think tanks, and YouTube contrarians milked it like fresh cow titty. Climate change must be fake, they declared, ignoring the fact that over 90% of excess heat goes into the oceans, not the air we breathe. And wouldn't you know it, ocean heat content, sea level rise, and Arctic melt were still chugging along exactly as predicted. So, recap for the 700th time. One is we do well, they say climate change is not happening. 2 is a completely natural hiatus moment occurring, which is cyclical to an extent, etc., where they hyper-focus on the hiatus moment and say, oh, there you go, because of the extraction of 2% of the whole data set that we're pointing at where things went really well, because, again, of these cyclical events, there's no actual climate change happening, etc. Now we reach the 5th report in 2014. This is where the IPCC really sharpened its focus. It made clear that human-caused emissions were the dominant driver of warming and presented a range of future pathways depending on how much we cut emissions. One scenario, the business-as-usual path, predicted nearly 5 Celsius of warming by 2100. That path is now considered unlikely, not because it was wrong, but because real-world policy, technology, and social movements pushed us slightly off that track. Still, we're not out of the woods. We're now heading towards what we heard earlier, 2.5 to 3% by 2100. Under obviously very optimistic analysis. And the 6th report, to recap from what you heard from JT, was finalized in 2021 and 2023. It was the most accurate and cautious to that point. It tightened the range of likely outcomes, improved climate sensitivity estimates, and included better modeling of feedback systems like melting ice and permafrost. So far, the 6th report projections are lining up well with what we're seeing in the real world, record heat years, rising oceans, and more intense storms. So, to round off the report talk, as boring as it might have been for some of you, it's extremely important for you to understand that climate change science and estimate models are very real, actively changing and evolving, hypersensitive process that allows us to get relatively close to seeing in the future of our species on this planet. It's not ideological rhetoric or hippie bullshit. It's there staring at us from the abyss, so we're sure as hell going to throw in a few measuring devices and see how deep it goes. Phrasing. I know what some of you motherfuckers are thinking. The biggest problem of the IPCC model, in my opinion, is not really a problem because they have to follow through on their scientific credibility. What do I mean? Well, because they're consensus-driven and careful not to overstate risk. Remember the first report? A slight-ish fuck-up because of the overstated. They're careful not to overstate risk, often leading them to underplay, at this point, worst-case scenarios. They've been historically hesitant to include newer or more controversial findings, even when they might turn out to be accurate. Sea level rise is the classic example. They left out ice sheet dynamics for years because it wasn't robust enough, the measuring system, I mean. What JT said, the guy on top of the iceberg. Which now turns out that we know because Greenland and Antarctica are melting much faster than we thought before. And why? Because the IPCC has always faced pressure from fossil fuel interests, from nation states that don't want to act, and from a media landscape obsessed with balance, even when one side is objectively wrong. But hey, that's the nature of the game, and the nature do be melting.
Rip. Yeah, thank you for that lovely rundown.
That was exhaustive. Jesus fucking Christ. The nerds will love this episode.
That's the thing. We keep getting asked for these heavy episodes, and we like to provide this information, but there is a lot of it, and we also we try to walk a fine line where we don't make these episodes too depressing, because there's a lot more we could have gotten into with some of the data there, like for example, biodiversity loss, extinctions, and stuff like that. That's pretty rough. So we hope you like the balance. Hopefully we strike a good one here. But let's continue in a grim vein and talk about some recent U.S. climate disasters. I'd say good timing because most of the country is currently experiencing a heat wave, but we're pretty much always experiencing some kind of climate fallout these days, so it'll probably always be good timing. There have been recently a couple of disasters that hit close to home for me. First was Asheville, North Carolina, which is just one state over from me, not too far of a drive. On September 24th of last year, the remnants of Hurricane Helene mixed with regional conditions to dump record-breaking inland rainfall over western North Carolina. The rainfall totals included almost 14 inches at the Asheville airport, from September 25th to 27th, 24 and a half in Mount Mitchell area, and up to 30.78 inches in Busick. Some areas more than twice a 1,000-year flood event threshold. It's hard to put into perspective just how severe this flood was. Both the French Broad River and the Swannanoa River crested at historic highs, 24.67 feet and 26.1 feet, respectively, surpassing records set during the Great Flood of 1917, more like the stupid tiny baby flood of 1916. Biltmore Village, the River Arts District, and surrounding neighborhoods experienced major flooding with up to 6 feet of water in some locations. Mudslides and landslides washed out I-40, I-26, and many other corridors, isolating Asheville for days. Residents lost power, water, and cell service. The municipal water system was severely damaged, leaving water unsafe to drink. Across the Asheville area, at least 108 deaths were confirmed as of early this year, with additional missing people reported. Helene is now the costliest disaster in the state's history, causing damages upwards of $60 billion. But the flooding itself was only part of the destruction. You think of the disaster as an isolated event, but that's not really the case. It continues. Forest Service assessments, for example, found that over 400,000 acres of forest had been lost or severely damaged, including nearly 30% of Buncombe County forest. Asheville's urban canopy was drastically reduced, leaving neighborhoods vulnerable to future floods, heat waves, and fire risks. This is often how it works, right? Like one climate disaster leaving our cities weaker and less prepared for the next one, which is now more likely because of the previous one. So it's just this awful self-perpetuating cycle. The more recent disaster, which was particularly scary for me because Kelsey and I had looked at moving to the region before we settled on South Carolina. This one was the Texas Hill Country flooding. A storm fueled by tropical moisture and the remnants of Tropical Storm Barry dumped over 23 inches of rain over a few hours across Texas Hill Country, particularly the Guadalupe River watershed. In just 45 minutes, the Guadalupe River surged by 26 feet in Hunt and nearly 29 feet in nearby areas. At least 135 lives were lost, including 107 confirmed deaths in Kerr County alone. Among the victims were 27 campers and counselors at Camp Mystic, a girls' summer camp on the Guadalupe River. I have friends who went to Camp Mystic. Thankfully, none of them or their kids were there, but all those kids had families. You think of these, the one death is a tragedy, whatever, a million's a statistic. It's like that. But eating 27 kids, that's insane. It's hard to even think of, as a parent myself, and as someone who lived in Texas, that is hard to even think about. But on the bright side, at least, something like 100 or 850 people were rescued in the region, with many of them these operations requiring helicopters due to flood isolation. Entire neighborhoods, entire campgrounds, RV parks, all along the river were just washed away. Many were caught by surprise before dawn, and that's one thing we normally don't think about. We assume that we'll have time to evacuate when things start to look bad. Oh yeah, there's a storm coming. Let's take a day or two to pack up and then head out when it's convenient. No, and entire communities were destroyed in under an hour, just washed away. And that's why it's so important to have something like a bug out bag or something ready, just a waterproof backpack or something with important documents and a few useful items for a disaster, something you can just grab and go. I've got a waterproof backpack with birth certificates, a little water purifier, things like the little medical things, contacts, glasses, things like that you can just pick up and toss in your car and go, or just wear and walk and just leave. Obviously we have to pressure governments to do their job and harden our population centers and reduce our emissions for the big picture stuff. But in the meantime, it doesn't hurt to be prepared, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah. But talking of disasters, Nick, I'll give it to you for climate red zones.
Thank you, sir. But especially thank you for sharing both of those stories. And one of them I think is additionally absurd because, reactionary governments long-term annihilate our ability of thriving, at the very least, in our communities, in our countries, on this beautiful planet of ours. But sometimes they also very directly impact something that hits us next year or 5 years or sometimes even next month. And with the second case, correct me if I'm wrong, but local community leaders and, local whatever government apparatchiks were very, very vocal about rejecting federal money for potential flood alleviation, etc., etc. Because, and I unironically watched the video. If you want to, you can plug it. You can find it online. It's absurd because it is coming from the communist federal government because they want to make us gay.
We do not want more of Biden's mandates attached to keeping Biden's money.
But these people are communists. They hate America. They're teaching it in our schools. They're invading the border as we speak. I don't think we should take any money from the federal government because they can't be trusted.
Now, we don't need these funds here. We've done just fine. And we'll get by without them. But you spend this money, you're signing a contract with the devil, and the devil's in the White House.
If you vote to keep Biden's money, I will hold you personally responsible and personally liable.
The Biden regime has proven to be tyrannical and anti-American. There is no part of this administration that has the good of America or Americans at heart. We want no part in anything coming down from the federal government. This is Texas, and Texans can take care of Texas.
And I don't believe we should take the money. We should not have it. I don't trust our federal government. I don't think that they're truthful with us. And in these days and these times or whatever, we can't afford to make a mistake like this.
So, yeah, sometimes long-term, they fuck us sometimes very directly. And it is, it comes
sad.
Or it even comes through your kids, man.
It's like, why not? Like, and this is something that I've talked about in a couple of videos before. It's like, okay, we see these events are happening more and more frequently. You'd have to be incredibly stupid not to see that these things are accelerating. Like, I'm tired of 1,000-year storms, all that stuff. I think of it as you're in the middle, you're out for a walk, right? You're crossing the street and a car is barreling towards you and it's clearly going to hit you. Like, does it matter if the person is doing it on purpose or if their brakes are out? No, because the end result is the same. You do what you can to avoid being hit by the car. It's the same situation with climate change. It doesn't matter whether you think it's just, random weather events or whether it is anthropomorphic, whatever it's called, the human-centered climate change, right? The end result is the same. You need to harden your cities. You need to have mitigation measures in effect. Why would you not? It's just like this bullshit posturing from these reactionaries.
100%. And this bullshit posturing sometimes becomes so impossible to implement because literally everything is burning around you or water is entering into your house. And that's why we got to talk about places where this sort of bullshit posturing cannot fly, at least domestically with their governments, even though most of them can't do anything about it. What are we talking about? Well, imagine the world's most vulnerable hotspots as zones painted in fire engine red. Places already battered by climate extremes, where the poorest people suffer the most and where climate injustice is running loose. These are in places looking at the warnings there where the collapse is already happening. So let's go throughout the planet and talk about some of these so-called hotspots, some of these so-called climate red zones, places where pretty much everyone can already feel the repercussions of fucking with our planet and finding out. Let's start with Africa, stretching from Sudan through Chad, Niger, Mali, Eritrea, Somalia, Ethiopia, and Kenya. This region is a climate powder keg. Temperatures here are rising 1.5 times faster than the global average, triggering mega droughts, desertification, collapsing crop yields, locust plagues, and literal famine. Millions face acute hunger, with malnutrition rates soaring through the entire community already. Countries like Chad rank as among the absolute worst prepared on the planet from a climate index standpoint. As if 1,000 years of imperial colonial conquest was not enough, its geographic location now leaves the country doomed as climate change casts its shadow, or lack thereof, on the already struggling state. To add insult to injury, these countries contribute virtually zero greenhouse gas emissions, yet face existential collapse. A lot of people, though, tend to imagine Equatorial Africa as the only place where shit is already literally hitting the fan. But that's not the case. Places reaching climate breaking point are all over the world. Think Bangladesh, coastal Myanmar, parts of East and Southern Africa, Egypt's Nile Delta, and even Haiti. These are classic flood zones. Bangladesh alone could lose around 11% of its landmass by 2050, displacing millions, while Myanmar and Eastern Africa face a deadly combo of flooding and sea level rise, with the poorest communities squeezed into sinking neighborhoods. Without rapid investment in flood defenses and social infrastructure, preferably grant-based, not loan-driven, communities will continue drowning. And history shows that when climate disasters strike, of course, it's women and the most marginalized and poorest people who suffer the most. Moving on around the planet, Bangladesh and Pakistan deserve their own section. Hell, a whole fucking episode, in my opinion. Pakistan has endured devastating monsoon floods, killing hundreds recently and on repeat from year to year, destroying crops and infrastructure across many of its regions, as well as reaching into central India. Heat waves baking cities like Karachi and Jacobabad kill thousands and scorch livelihoods, especially in informal sectors. Over in the Himalayas, India has flagged over 100 dams at risk of glacial lake outburst floods, sudden catastrophic releases caused by glacier melting, a nightmare scenario for communities downstream. Tiny countries like Kiribati, I'm sorry if I mispronounced it, are literally being erased. These low-lying island states face existential threats from sea level rise, fresh water contamination, loss of arable land, and total displacement. Kiribati has already purchased land in Fiji as an emergency plan, though that feels more like a grim resignation than a solution. Similar vulnerability applies across Vanuatu, Dominica, Honduras, the Bahamas. Many island states are now living through their so-called superstorm era, where hurricanes intensify, ocean heat destabilizes fisheries, and climate justice seldom arrives with sufficient, if any, support. All of this without even mentioning active or semi-active war zones like Yemen, Syria, Afghanistan, DRC, Central African Republic, South Sudan, Chad. These nations already suffer war, state collapse, famine, and then climate extremes strike as well. Droughts in Somalia and Ethiopia triggered displacement of millions, worsened by conflict and a pandemic that killed aid and any financial capacity of the local governments. In Syria and Yemen, conflicts collide with water scarcity and desertification, deepening crisis in the most fragile societies, while monumental funding gaps remain from the global north. So to finish off this segment with the following: these red zones are more than data. They are dislocated families, failed seasons, drowned towns, and futures robbed. From Central America's repeated hurricanes to Bangladesh's sinking deltas to Chad's dust-ridden collapse, the impacts are inequitable, systemic, and accelerating.
Yeah, well, I said we weren't going to make it grim, but there y'all go. It's all something to keep in mind. Like, yes, it's bad, but humans always, and maybe this is cope, but humans always find a way to rise to the occasion. And so, if you're a little bit less off than someone in Chad or Niger or Myanmar or wherever, maybe, take the time to do something about it, whether to help harden your communities or to help educate, or use whatever time and resources you have at your disposal to make sure that people keep this stuff in mind, and just try your best to keep your family and your loved ones safe, at least. So let's talk potential climate havens, right? A lot of places are looking not so great. But surely there are some places that will fare better, right? Well, in theory, yes, there are. But there is a big asterisk. Would you like to know 2 places often considered climate havens? Asheville, North Carolina, and the Texas Hill Country. These are the 2 places that just got wrecked. So while it's good to know that there are places around the world that will likely fare better than others, these recent disasters have done a good job reminding us that nowhere is like truly safe. Every place on Earth exists on Earth, which is a planet experiencing monumental shifts in a short amount of time, right? And so much of the fallout will be unpredictable. We're all, just cheesy. We're all in this together. But yeah, we're kind of like in the same boat because we're all on the same marble, which is experiencing these things that we've never experienced before. So the scientists are doing their best to predict stuff, but there will be anomalies, and there will be things that are unexpected. So that being said, where should you look if you're particularly worried about climate change and you want to move somewhere a bit less dangerous? First, what are we looking for specifically? To be considered a climate haven, a place has to have lower exposure to sea level rise, lower exposure to wildfires and extreme heat. You need reliable fresh water. You need a milder temperature, room for climate migrants. This is a big one. And another big one, long-term resilience planning. So here are a handful of places in the U.S. that fit that bill. We'll do regions and then smaller subdivisions. So the Great Lakes region. Why? You've got freshwater abundance, you got low wildfire risk, and you've got a moderate climate. So that's places like Buffalo, New York, Rochester, New York, Duluth, Minnesota, Detroit, Michigan, Cleveland, Ohio, Ann Arbor, Michigan, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Fun fact, I used to live in Cleveland. Was a shithole back then, but maybe I've heard it's actually pretty nice now. So those are a few. If you're anywhere in that region, if you just want to kind of maybe scoot a little bit closer to those cities, could be a good shout. But then you've got the Appalachian and inland mountain towns. You've got elevation there that buffers heat. It's inland, which means low sea level risk. You've got often a lower wildfire risk than the west. Towns and cities in this region include, unfortunately, Asheville, North Carolina, though that is now contested, Roanoke, Virginia, Harrisonburg, Virginia, Johnson City, Tennessee, Fayetteville, Arkansas. You got northern New England, which has a cooler climate, ample forests and water, fewer natural disasters, though ice storms and rural isolation are risks up here. Places like Burlington, Vermont, that's Bernie's hometown. You got Montpelier, Vermont, and you got Portland, Maine. Then finally, you've got Midwestern cities, which have affordable housing, good water access, minimal wildfire or hurricane risk. And those are cities like Madison, Wisconsin, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota, Iowa City, Iowa, and Chicago, Illinois. Chicago has some flooding risk, but it's got significant infrastructure and investment to mitigate that. Any of the really big cities, you're probably okay infrastructure-wise, at least better off than some of the medium-sized ones. Now, of course, the U.S. isn't the only place on Earth with climate havens. A number of cities in Canada are good options, as well as Germany, Sweden, the northern parts of Japan. And you might notice a trend here. Colder places are projected to fare better in the coming years. There's no surprise there, okay? But it is a bummer for people like me who hate the cold. But none of this means you need to move to any of these places, obviously, or that you'd even be guaranteed safety, even if you did. But if you're looking to move anyway, these are some good options to consider, at least from a geographical and climate perspective. Still do your research and everything like that. But if you're looking to move, those are the best options that I could find, at least, particularly in the United States. But ask around online, see what you can find, and hopefully none of the rest of those cities will be crossed off the list like Asheville recently was. But that is it for my climate havens.
But I mean, you would be, if you're looking to move right now, you would be preemptive striking before hundreds of millions of people start moving at some point if we do not address this.
Correct.
This is one of the 700 different social and economic impacts that climate change will cause, which has a ramifying effect down the line. The first one that, in my opinion, is arguably the most problematic one is population shifts, mass migrations. Usually Usually it's the talking point of the right wing to complain about a mass movement of people. But in this particular context, it is objectively a terrifying prospect, not from the same perspective as what the right wing pitches of, like, the hordes of the unwashed masses that are incompatible with our civilization crossing the border, etc., etc. No, just the fact that the tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people will need to leave areas which contributed to the global economy massively into areas where there is no infrastructure to upkeep them and protect them, which then causes further mass migration and destabilization from those lands where a lot of people went to into other countries, which again further motivates not only the destabilization of local infrastructure, because here we're talking about truly massive migrations in incredibly short amounts of time as the cascade effect starts hitting in strong. That will immediately cause political ramifications. Well, where it would allow the right wing to utilize fear of mass migrations in order to develop their own reactionary project in many of the countries, which would be defined as safer havens as compared to whatever other country you're bringing in, where the other countries where people are coming in from. This will loan itself really well to hyper-militarization, to the classic ideas of ecofascism, where we now have come to a point, now I'm quoting what they could say and what they will definitely say, we fucked up. That's the first time when reactionaries are going to start admitting to the fact that the environment was absolutely destroyed, but it is what it is. So now it's a free-for-all, and we must ensure whatever resources are left for us versus them. We do not, you will obviously have some much milder and smarter, not so like racialized types of ecofascists, which will use this very utilitarian approach where, like, no, we're not superior or inferior. These people are completely normal and chill. There's just not enough stuff around. So we got to protect our trees and our stuff and our way of life. Otherwise, everything goes to hell. And then that snowballs into even less environmental protection, snowballs into even harsher and more extractive means of generating the many fuels we need to drive our society, which then increases climate change, which then causes for more and more people to migrate, which then informs populations towards a more right-wing attitude of us versus them, and you have basically a death spiral of civilization. This is only one of the many hundreds of different theorems on how, if we allow ourselves to even reach such a breaking point, the direction that we could go in, that eventually, puts us, to repeat myself, in a complete death spiral. Milder things that will obviously happen range from entire industries being completely turned obsolete, with a massive shift in capital towards what they define as something that can generate maximum profit at a point where they realize that there's no going back. Okay, capital will seek to reproduce itself, even if it understands that the species that reproduces said capital is potentially doomed. Its migrationary patterns are very self-evident and are that of profit-seeking. So the only reason currently profit and capital sometimes does move into pro-climate change alleviation programs in large industries or corporations is because they're scared of losing money, or because they're scared of potentially losing their industry to larger climate change. If they get to a point in which they understand that, motherfucker, there ain't no climate change disaster happening, they're gonna abandon all of those masks they wear out of fear, offer repercussions and so on, etc., etc. This, though, obviously does not have to be as doom-pilled. These are all variants that you need to know because you need to properly pitch them to everyone because they need to understand that this is the direction we're going in if we want to fuck this up to such a scale, which should be proper motivation for policy change, for progressive movements, and even if things get intense enough, let's call it, where reform is no longer seen as viable, even revolutionary movements. It is a make it or break it point for our species to an extent. And a lot of people call what I'm saying right now alarmist, and what JT says as well. And a lot of right-wingers even do it. You will hear Jordan Peterson, you will hear everybody. They're like, oh, but you're talking 20 centimeters of water. Oh, you're talking 3% Celsius, et cetera, because they always talk about those very specific, yes, hyper-scientific, very, very specific impacts on the climate, but they never include everything that, I just mentioned, which is the massive social impact of problems that you think and that you've thought, especially in the global north, that you can just keep outsourcing and keep outsourcing and keep outsourcing and keep outsourcing, thinking that they're not going to come and knock on your motherfucking door. We have seen what the migration of between 7 and 12 million people due to the Syrian civil war caused when it comes to the upheaval of the right wing in Europe, the rise of xenophobia, and the push against any sort of international solidarity. Now imagine hundreds of millions of people running from places that can no longer sustain life or at least acceptable standards of life, and how that is going to impact everything. And now this is one story of how migration can impact it. Now imagine the 150 other stories of capital fluctuation, of industry catastrophe, of quite literally those same fires that are currently in Chad reaching you in your comfortable home in Paris as well, and the other 148 potential scenarios. And you will realize that it's not just, even though that is very massively important, but it's not just some sort of deep patriotism and love towards our planet, which all of us should have because she is the mother that has raised our species, but also from pure motherfucking practicality. That shit will spiral down to us, and it will remind us the way simple COVID did for a couple of fucking years of just how insignificant we are when nature wants to wipe us off its fucking shoulder. So let's make sure we're not in her fucking way, because she's a motherfucker, okay? Nature ain't no beautiful angel. She is blah blah. Get my fucking point. Like yeah. She's rolling, okay?
Yeah.
So
whatever that Lord of the Rings quote is, as cruel and beautiful as the sea, whatever. Yeah. But that's exactly right. And I hope, dear listener, you are ready for the same people who are both sidesing the Israel-Palestine thing today to be the eco-fascists of tomorrow. That's the liberals. It's something that each of us needs to come to grips with in our own way. There are a lot of liberals in the United States. And
everywhere, my friend.
Everywhere, yeah, but particularly in the U.S., where people don't realize that there are options besides conservative or liberal. I'm trying to think how to say this. You will have friends who will start saying things that you would never in a million years have thought they would say, and it will to them will be completely consistent with their worldview. And it's just the way that it's packaged. But the end result will be indistinguishable from the rhetoric of an out-and-out fascist, of the most violent racist you can think of. And that is something that we need to figure out how to deal with. If you can win those people over, Godspeed, do your best. If you can't, just be aware of what you're dealing with there, because that is a real, the liberal eco-fascism arc is coming. We are going to see liberal death squads in Portland. We are going to see cyberpunk slums as people migrate. Interesting times indeed.
It is also like it is the mother of all irony. I consider fascism to be, because it presupposes might makes right, and we will defend whatever resources we have for as long as we can. For as long as we can is the key word there. Your cities eventually will be overrun, or your cities themselves will become insufficient to upkeep themselves from the ensuing climate change, and then you will become the unwashed hordes attacking whatever other place can still upkeep relatively normal standards of life. It is a patch, like all fascism, a patch on top of a patch on top of a patch on top of a fucking tumor. And communists are like begging you to just look at the fucking tumor and remove it. That's it.
Yeah.
That's fucking it. So even from the most selfish, even from the most might makes right perspective, if you're an unhinged buff, you should also still support a communist movement, because it's the only one that in the long term will provide safety for the coming generations or yourself even. Ironically, everything else is death spiral.
Yeah.
Everything else is death spiral.
And even that, like, it's death spiral, but also it's like whiny, do nothing bullshit, which the right should be like completely opposed to. It's like, oh, boo-hoo, shut up, do something, whatever. Anyway, that's climate change for you. That's your update, everybody. We did our best to cram as much as we could into an hour-ish. There's a lot more to go over. If this is something that interests you, let us know. We can delve deeper into specifics about this, whether it's the ramifications of climate change, whether it's mitigation strategies, whether it's just the hard data, whether it's case studies in good planning, like what we see in China, their afforestation project, their green cities, stuff like that. It's a really big topic. It touches everything else. So let us know what you'd like to hear, and we would be glad to cover it. Before we sign off, we would love to thank our beautiful patrons, without whom we really genuinely could not do this show. I have to take a single sponsor on my YouTube channel, and they're great, but like, it's so much better and more freeing to just be able to say what we want to say without having to run anything by anybody, and that is only possible because of you guys. So thank you deeply from the bottom of our hearts. Mwah. We love you so much. If you're not yet a patron, please do consider it. Get a bunch of cool perks, bonus episodes, exclusive episodes, 2 a month, access to the coolest place on the internet, which is the Deprogram Discord. Even at our highest tier, you get access to hang out with us once a month with our for our Habibi chats. So if that sounds cool, sign up, Deprogram, or patreon.com/the Deprogram. And with all that being said, this has been The Deprogram. I'm JT.
I'm Ugopnik.
Invest in air conditioning.